Hello, my name's Abigail. At 4 a.m., my sister dragged me out of bed and shoved me out the door like I was a stray dog. No shoes, no explanation, just 20 bucks in my hand and the words, "Survive with that, loser." Our father had just won $5.3 million, but the ticket was in my name. I kept quiet for years. I stayed invisible while they smiled for cameras, while she played the hero. But now, I want to ask you something. What happens when the one they threw away is the only one holding the truth? I didn't think the sound of a fist against a door could carry that much hatred. But that morning, at exactly 4:03 a.m., I learned it could. I jolted up in bed, heart thudding against my ribs. My room, or rather, the converted laundry room at the back of the house, was pitch black except for the dull glow of the hallway light seeping under the door. The banging didn't stop. It came louder, more urgent, followed by Seraphine's voice, shrill and biting. "Get up, pack your stuff. You're done here." I sat there, stunned. Not because she was yelling, she'd snapped plenty of times, but because of the finality in her tone. There was no build-up, no warning, just a full-blown execution at dawn. When I opened the door, Seraphine was already inside the house, barefoot, her robe tied too tightly around her waist like she was bracing for a fight. Her eyes were hard, like glass under tension. "Don't look at me like that," she spat. "You know this day was coming. Honestly, I should have done this months ago." I blinked, trying to find the words. "What? What are you talking about?" She crossed her arms. "You freeloaded long enough. I'm not your damn safety net. You're 38, Abigail, not 16. You've got no job, no rent, no contribution, just drama." "I took care of Dad when he was sick," I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "You call microwaving soup and changing his pillbox care? Please." The cruelty was surgical, sharp, deliberate. She wasn't just angry, she wanted to humiliate me. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to pack," she said. "I've already moved your suitcase to the front door." I looked down at my pajama pants and the oversized college hoodie that had long lost its color. "Can I at least get dressed?" She snorted. "Sure. Wear whatever you want while you're out there. I don't care." Out there. It echoed in my skull as I grabbed my phone and wallet and shoved what I could into a tote bag. The hallway felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me, trembling not from fear, but from the suddenness. No one deserves to be thrown out like trash, especially not by family. When I stepped into the living room, she was already waiting, arms folded, chin high like a judge passing sentence. She held out a crumpled $20 bill between two fingers. "Here, should be enough for breakfast." "Maybe a ride to wherever people like you end up." I didn't take it. So she tossed it at me. It landed on the hardwood floor, limp and wet with condensation from the iced water she was drinking. "Survive with that, loser," she muttered. The front door opened with a click. She motioned toward it. My suitcase sat there, wheels slightly uneven, one zipper half open from being yanked out too fast. I didn't even remember packing it. Maybe she had done that too. I turned once, expecting, hoping, my father would appear. His door remained closed. So I stepped outside. The porch light cast a dim yellow halo over the front yard. Everything looked too still, like the neighborhood itself was ashamed to witness this. It hadn't rained, but the air was damp. My suitcase was already damp, soaking in dew. The $20 bill had followed me outside, stuck to my tote bag like an insult that wouldn't go away. The door closed behind me, no slamming, just a quiet, final click. Like sealing a coffin. I stood on the sidewalk, barefoot, heart full of adrenaline, hands full of nothing. I had $20 and a phone with 17% battery. I checked the time again. 4:17 a.m. No one was out. No buses. No open stores. Not even a dog barking. There was nowhere to go. Not at this hour. Not in this condition. I dragged the suitcase toward the corner, where the street lamp still flickered like it couldn't decide whether to give me light or not. I sat down on the curb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the house that once felt like shelter. and now looked like a prison I'd just been exiled from. I pulled my phone out, intending to call someone, anyone, but there was no one left to call. Then I opened my photo gallery. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for proof that I existed, that I mattered. And there it was. The picture. The lottery ticket. Taken 2 days ago at the corner gas station, the one I always went to after running errands for Seraphine and Dad. I'd snapped the photo to keep track, like I did every week. Habit, not hope. But this ticket was different. I zoomed in. The barcode, the purchase timestamp, the store location, and the name. My name, printed clearly on the digital receipt. The ticket was mine. That $5.3 million win. Seraphine paraded around like it had fallen into her lap. I bought it, I played it, I photographed it, she stole it, and then she threw me out like garbage. Something shifted inside me, not rage, not sadness, something colder, clearer. I picked up the $20 from the sidewalk, folded it slowly, and tucked it into my hoodie pocket. This wasn't just cruel, it was calculated, and I wasn't going to disappear quietly. By the time the sun crept over the tops of the pecan trees lining Oak Haven Drive, my legs ached, and the soles of my feet felt like they'd been sandpapered raw from walking the uneven sidewalks. I'd spent the better part of 2 hours circling my own childhood neighborhood, avoiding busier roads, praying no one I knew would see me like this. Shoes in one hand, suitcase trailing behind like a broken promise. The $20 Seraphine had thrown at me was still crumpled in my hoodie pocket. I could have used it to call a cab, but I didn't want to spend it. Not out of pride, just defiance. That money wasn't kindness. It was an insult dressed up in currency. I found a bench at the edge of the small park near the old church. I hadn't been there in years. When we were kids, Seraphine and I used to come here with our dad on Sundays, running barefoot across the grass, giggling until our lungs burned. That was before we became this. I sat down and stared at the swings creaking in the breeze. The silence pressed in, thick and unforgiving. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to a single soul since being tossed out like trash. Every part of me felt hollow, except for one stubborn little ember sitting in the center of my chest. That ember had a name: truth. I leaned back against the cold bench slats and let my thoughts drift. Not forward, but backward. That's the thing about being discarded. You don't think about tomorrow. You relive the reasons why you weren't worth keeping. 2 years ago, after Dad had his second fall, I came back home. Seraphine told me, "You can stay, but make it temporary. I'm not running a charity." Still, I came. I thought she was being harsh because she was stressed. But now I know better. It wasn't stress. It was ownership. She believed she owned this family, its image, its history, its future. She didn't even offer me a bedroom. I was told to take the laundry room, right off the kitchen, with one narrow window and a folding cot barely big enough for a child. No closet, no place to put anything that mattered. Just a washer, a dryer, and a stack of detergent pods beside my pillow. When I asked if we could at least get a small dresser, Seraphine laughed. "Abby, it's temporary. No need to play house." But days turned to weeks, and weeks into months. And somehow, temporary became my reality. That room wasn't mine. Nothing in that house was. Not the pantry, not the couch, not even the thermostat. I was a ghost that washed dishes, drove Dad to his appointments, and disappeared when the real residents had company. What really did it for me, what planted the first real seed of something uglier, was that Father's Day dinner. Just 1 month ago, Seraphine hosted it like she was throwing a gala. She printed name cards, set out fancy silverware, and even had floral arrangements brought in from that boutique florist over on Franklin. Everything was polished and curated. Except me, there were 8 place settings at the table, each with a little white card printed in gold. I remember them all. Victor, Seraphine, Uncle Jeff, Aunt Carol. Even Seraphine's accountant had a spot, Greg, but there wasn't one for me. I stood in the kitchen with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, watching as everyone took their seats. No one noticed I was missing from the table. No one asked. When I finally did sit, it was on a bar stool at the far end, near the sink. And when dessert came out, lemon meringue, Dad's favorite, there were only 8 slices. I got none. Seraphine looked at me and shrugged. Sorry, didn't expect extras. That was the night I realized I wasn't invisible by accident. I was invisible by design. Back in the present, the park was beginning to stir. Dog walkers, a jogger or two. I couldn't sit there much longer without looking suspicious or homeless. I was both. I stood, brushed the dirt off the back of my hoodie, and checked my phone. Battery at 12%. I opened the photo app one more time and stared at the picture of the lottery ticket. My fingers trembled, but not from fear. Not anymore. There it was, clear as daylight, store location, timestamp, purchase confirmation, and most importantly, my name, not Seraphine's, not Victor's, mine. That ember in my chest flared just a bit brighter. I knew what she'd done. She knew it too. And deep down, I think my father did as well. But he said nothing. Just like he said nothing at the Father's Day dinner. Just like he said nothing when I moved into the laundry room. Maybe silence ran in the family, but I wasn't going to inherit that legacy. I walked 2 more blocks to a gas station and used part of the 20 to get a lukewarm cup of coffee and a protein bar. The clerk, a kid who looked barely old enough to shave, didn't even glance at me. That's the thing about being invisible. You learn how to slip past pity. I sat outside the station, sipping slowly, charging my phone at the lone outdoor outlet. I kept looking at that picture, zooming in, zooming out. I thought about deleting it, about walking away, letting Seraphine win, let her bask in the lie she built like a monument to herself. But I couldn't. Not this time. Maybe I'd never been the favorite. Maybe I didn't have a career to boast about, or a home of my own, or friends who hosted me at elaborate dinners with custom-printed cards. But I had this truth, and for the first time in a very long time, it was something Seraphine couldn't control. I wasn't family to her, but I was still a citizen, and the State Lottery Commission didn't play favorites. If I was invisible to my own blood, then I'd make damn sure I was seen where it mattered. I looked down at my phone one last time. 9% battery, enough to make one call. So I dialed the only person I knew wouldn't ask questions, Cassian. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but he picked up on the second ring. Abigail? His voice was scratchy, like he hadn't had his morning coffee yet. Everything all right? I swallowed my pride. Not really, but I need a favor, a ride, and maybe a witness. There was a pause. Then, where are you? I told him, I'll be there in 15. And just like that, the ghost at the family table stood up. Cassian pulled up in his old Chevy just as the morning light started softening the hard edges of the gas station parking lot. He didn't ask why I looked like I'd just crawled through a hurricane. He didn't need to. He popped the trunk and motioned silently. I slid my suitcase in, climbed into the passenger seat, and buckled up without a word. The car smelled like coffee and citrus air freshener. He kept his eyes on the road as we pulled away. Didn't expect to hear from you again, he said after a few minutes. But I'm glad you called. I nodded. I didn't know who else to trust. We didn't talk much during the drive. Cass had always been a man of few words, the kind who believed silence did more than filler conversation ever could. That's why I knew he wouldn't push me for the full story. And maybe that's what I needed, space and a place to think. He took me to a trailer on the edge of town. His aunt had passed away last year, and the unit had sat empty since. It was nothing fancy, just a basic single-wide with creaky floorboards and a water heater that made more noise than it should. But it had a working shower and 4 walls that weren't judging me. That was more than I had yesterday. Electric's still on, Cass said as he handed me the spare key. Fridge might need a clean. If you need anything, I'm 5 minutes away. Thank you, I said. And I meant it in a way that couldn't be overstated. After he left, I stood in the center of the living room for a while. The couch sagged. The curtains were mismatched, but it was mine, at least for now. I set my suitcase down and pulled out the essentials: clothes, toothbrush, phone charger. At the bottom, tucked between an old sweatshirt and a pair of flip-flops, was my memory box. Small, dented, covered in stickers from a decade ago. I hadn't opened it in a long time. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I popped the lid and started rummaging through old photos, birthday cards, receipts from road trips, and faded bus tickets from when I lived out west. Then I found it, a sealed yellow envelope, wrinkled but intact. My name was scribbled across the front in my father's handwriting. For Abigail, when the time is right. I hesitated, then I tore it open. Inside was a letter dated 5 years earlier. The ink was smudged but readable. Abby, you always believed in second chances. I don't say this enough, but I see you. I know you've been buying those tickets for me every week. You say it's for luck. I know it's for hope. This ticket thing, it's really for you, because you never stop trying. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. It wasn't a legal document. It wouldn't hold up in court. But it meant something. It meant he knew. He knew I was the one running to the corner store week after week, rain or shine, scraping together my last few dollars to chase a dream I barely believed in anymore. Not for the money, for the possibility. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I grabbed my phone and pulled up the photo again. The ticket. My ticket. Purchased at 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday. The same Thursday Dad had thrown out his back, and Seraphine was too busy meeting with her realtor. She'd tossed me her debit card that morning, told me to pick up some groceries and drop off her dry cleaning. I did all of it, and on the way home, I used my own money to buy the ticket, like I always did. The photo showed the 6 numbers, the exact winning combination, the purchase location, and most importantly, my name on the confirmation email from the lottery account I'd created years ago using my address, my ID, my everything. It wasn't just a whim, it wasn't a handoff, it was mine. And she stole it. I stared at that photo like it was a map to something deeper, something buried under every insult, every dismissal, every time she looked at me like I was in the way. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I didn't care about the money as much as I cared about what it represented. She could keep her house, her car, her phony friends, but she couldn't keep my truth. Not this time. That afternoon, I borrowed Cassian's laptop. Mine had been gathering dust at the old house, and I doubted Seraphine would be kind enough to mail it. The keyboard was a little sticky, but it worked. I sat at the small kitchen table and typed with more clarity than I'd had in weeks. Petition for rightful claim to lottery proceeds. The words came faster than I expected. I included every detail, the recurring history of me buying tickets, the photo evidence, the email confirmations, the ride Cass had given me, the fact that Seraphine hadn't bought a single ticket in years. And the letter. I wouldn't include the letter in the official filing. It wasn't legally binding, but I'd reference it. If push came to shove, I'd bring it to court. If nothing else, it painted a picture of intent. And judges paid attention to intention. Once I had the draft done, I called Cass. You remember the day I bought that ticket? I asked. Sure. You said you weren't feeling lucky, but you did it anyway. Something about it being your ritual. Can you write a statement? Just what you saw? That you drove me? Where I went? What I said? That sort of thing? He didn't hesitate. Yeah, no problem. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Cass, I might need you to be a witness. A pause. Then, whatever you need. By sunset, the draft was complete. I had the documents saved, the screenshots backed up, the ticket photo stored in 3 separate places. I wasn't going to let this get swept under the rug. This wasn't about begging my sister for kindness. It wasn't about family anymore. This was about right and wrong. The sun dipped low behind the trees as I stood outside the trailer and looked up at the sky. It was quiet, too quiet. But my mind was louder than ever. They wanted me quiet. They wanted me small. But I had a truth that would roar if I let it. And I would. This wasn't going to be a family drama. It was going to be a legal one. I sat alone in the trailer's kitchen that next morning, nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee and watching the cursor blink on my laptop screen. I had rewritten the opening line of my formal complaint 3 times. It wasn't writer's block. It was restraint. I didn't want this to sound angry. I wanted it to sound deliberate, controlled, unshakable. Before I could finalize anything, a familiar ping hit my phone. It was a Facebook notification. I hadn't expected to see Seraphine's name pop up in my feed. I assumed I'd already been blocked, or maybe she hadn't thought I was worth the trouble yet. But there it was, A post from her account, shared by a mutual cousin. "So proud to finally give Dad the life he deserves," it read. "Some of us were born to carry the weight. The rest, well, they find other ways to make noise." There was a photo attached, a staged picture of her standing behind our father in his recliner, both of them smiling. Seraphine was dressed like a Sunday morning real estate agent, blazer, pearls, and all. My dad looked tired. The way people do when they're trying to smile through something they didn't agree to. The comments rolled in fast. "You're amazing, Seraphine. He's lucky to have you. You've always been the strong one." I scrolled for a while, not entirely sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe someone questioning the timeline, maybe a relative calling out the absence of my name. But no, they all bought it. Every word. And why wouldn't they? Seraphine had spent years rehearsing her role, the dutiful daughter, the family's backbone, the one who handled the hard stuff. It didn't matter what actually happened behind closed doors. What mattered was what she presented to the world. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Not after everything. Instead, I hit Save Post, downloaded the image, and moved it into my case folder. I leaned back, letting the chair creak under me, and closed my eyes. It took me back to a night that had haunted me in pieces. A month earlier, our father's birthday. Seraphine had thrown a backyard dinner party that looked more like a political fundraiser than a family celebration. Edison lights strung across the patio, hired servers passing hors d'oeuvres, name cards in cursive font. And once again, I was the one behind the scenes, helping prep food, topping off glasses, staying out of photos. I remember standing by the side table, checking the time while pretending to rearrange the utensils. I was holding my phone, recording a short video clip for Dad's birthday montage. Nothing fancy, just a 10-second scan of the decorations. In the background, I caught Seraphine chatting with one of her friends near the fire pit. Wine glass in hand, posture perfect. "Abigail?" she laughed. "She's just staying here temporarily. She's not really part of the household." The friend looked puzzled. "She's your sister, right?" Seraphine shrugged. "She just needs to move on." "This house, it's not hers." At the time, I remember freezing, not because of what she said, but because of how casually she said it, like it was a fact, not an insult, like I was a tenant she was waiting to evict. I hadn't thought about that clip in weeks, but now it came back like a bullet to the ribs. I unlocked my phone, scrolled back through my videos, and there it was, labeled BD Montage Raw 2. I clicked play. Same lights, same angle, same words, and clear as day, her voice. Cold, confident, cutting. "She's not really part of the household." I replayed it 3 times. Then I trimmed the clip, cut everything but the 12 seconds of her speaking. I saved the audio and renamed the file. Exhibit A, Erasure. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. It just settled, like a weight had clicked into place. I emailed the clip to myself, then backed it up on a flash drive. 2 copies. Just in case. Then I drafted a short message. Subject: Let's talk. Message: Seraphine, I have something you should hear. It's not a threat. It's a fact. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing, before this becomes something more public. Abigail, I hit send. And then I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. I tried to distract myself, washed a couple of plates, wiped down the counters, even walked around the trailer park once. The air smelled of dust and motor oil, and the cicadas were already humming. When I came back inside, my phone was buzzing, not from Seraphine, from the platform. "You have been blocked from viewing this user's content." She didn't reply to the email. She blocked me. No explanation, no denial, no attempt at civility. Just shut the door in my face again. She knew. She knew what she said. She knew what I had. And her response wasn't apology. It was erasure. Again. I could have exploded. Could have called her. Left a voicemail full of truth and fury. Could have posted the audio myself. Let the world hear what the golden daughter sounded like when the cameras weren't rolling. But I didn't. Because this time, it wasn't about shouting louder. It was about being smarter. I copied the message I'd sent her, archived it with the video clip, and added a timestamp. Then I added a new note to my folder. Attempted resolution, ignored. Let the judge see that I tried. Let the court hear what she said. And when it all came out, let her be the one who looked like a stranger to her own family. The message I sent her sat in my sent folder like a quiet warning she never bothered to read. And maybe that was the most Seraphine thing she could have done. Ignore it, pretend it didn't exist, and hope the silence would swallow me whole. But I've learned something about silence. It doesn't disappear. It builds. It echoes. It learns how to roar. The next morning, while sipping coffee from a chipped mug and scrolling half awake through my notifications, a post lit up my phone screen and the fire under my skin. After years of silence, Seraphine had written, I finally gave our family hope. I fought alone. I sacrificed alone. And this win, it's mine. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Like I was some faded footnote, some old roommate who left no mark. Attached was a glossy photo. Seraphine standing beside our father, his smile tight and eyes tired, her hand resting proudly on his shoulder like she owned him too. Local media had already picked it up. The headline on the repost read, Daughter's loyalty wins the jackpot. Comments poured in. You're amazing. He raised a queen. Your sister must be so proud. Each comment felt like a slap I didn't see coming. I wasn't just being written out of the story, I was being scrubbed. Rewritten as an invisible chapter that never mattered. I read every line, every emoji-filled praise, and not once did I cry. Instead, I clicked Save, downloaded the photo, and filed it under Evidence Public Misrepresentation. Then I called her. Voicemail. I left one sentence. Retract your post or face a different kind of spotlight. That night, I worked late into the dark, only stopping to refill my water bottle and plug in my laptop. The ticket photo, check. The ride receipt from Cassian's Uber account, check. The screen recording of my lottery confirmation email, check. The voice memo from her birthday party, check. I renamed the folder, Formal Filing Prep. The following morning, I met Cassian at the diner off Elm. It wasn't fancy, just scrambled eggs, burnt toast, and a waitress who called us both hun, but it was neutral ground. He slid into the booth across from me, brushing rain from his hoodie. You sure you want to do this? He asked, not in doubt, but out of care. I don't want to, I said. But I will. He stirred his coffee. I remember that day like it was yesterday. You were nervous, said it was your last $10 before payday. It was. And you said, watch, I'll win the big one and no one will believe me. I smiled at the memory, but it hurt, because I'd been right. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. Wrote the statement like you asked. I included the time, date, pickup, drop-off, the store. I even attached the trip receipt. You didn't have to do all that. You shouldn't have to do this alone. I folded the paper and slid it into my file folder. You'd be willing to testify? Of course, he said. But Abigail, if this goes public, she's not going to play nice. She never has. When I left the diner, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy. I drove straight to Seraphine's office, a 2-story white and brick building tucked in the back of a commercial plaza that smelled of lawn mulch and overwatered planters. The receptionist recognized me. Miss Delacroix, I think she's in a meeting. That's fine, I said, holding out the manila envelope. Could you please make sure she gets this? She looked unsure. Is this, personal? It's professional, I replied, with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I watched her carry it back to Seraphine's office, knock, and then disappear behind the frosted glass door. I didn't wait around. I drove back to the trailer, peeled off my damp jacket, and sat at the table, phone face down. I told myself I wouldn't check it. Not until tomorrow. I didn't want to see whether she'd called. I wanted her to feel the weight of silence for once. But that's not what happened. The next morning, I opened my phone and found myself blocked. Email. Social media. Every channel she could cut off, she did. She didn't send a reply. She didn't offer a denial or a counterstatement. She deleted me. Not just online. From the narrative. From the photo. From the truth. She believed I was still that girl in the laundry room, that ghost at the dinner table, that woman too timid to fight, too tired to speak, too starved for validation to ever strike back. But she was wrong. I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't seeking her apology. I was demanding justice, and I was doing it on paper, with receipts, dates, documentation, and a voice that didn't need a microphone to be loud. The moment I received the cease and desist letter from Seraphine's lawyer, I knew we'd crossed a line that couldn't be undone. The letter didn't rattle me. If anything, it validated everything I already suspected. She was scared. And she should have been. That same morning, I drove into town and parked outside a law office tucked between a CPA's office and a used bookstore. The sign above the door was small but clean: Sophia Nash, attorney at law. Cassian had referred her, said she was sharp, didn't talk in circles, and had a record of settling quietly but thoroughly. I didn't need a lawyer who wanted headlines. I needed someone who knew how to move silently and leave the other side unprepared. Inside, Sophia greeted me in jeans and a black blazer, barefoot behind her desk, sipping tea from a chipped mug that said, "Nope." She had the look of someone who worked better in chaos than order, a desk cluttered with papers, post-its stuck to her monitor, a half-eaten granola bar sitting on top of a file folder. "You're Abigail?" she asked, sliding her glasses down her nose. "Yes," I said, handing over my folder. She opened it, glanced through the top few documents, then leaned back. "You don't just have a case," she said. "You've got a story the press would foam at the mouth for." "That's not what I want," I said, sitting stiffly. "I want what's mine." She nodded. "Even better." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every piece of evidence. The lottery ticket photo, time-stamped, GPS tagged, my name on the confirmation email. The bank transaction showing the $10 debit from my account. The screen recording of me logging into the state lottery portal. The ride receipt from Cassian. His written statement. The audio clip from the birthday party. By the time we were done, she was smiling like a poker player with a royal flush. "This won't be fast," she warned, "but it'll be clean. You ready for that?" "I've been ready since she threw $20 at me and called me deadweight," Sophia laughed under her breath. She messed with the wrong, quiet woman. That afternoon, I returned to the trailer to grab more of my things. The air was muggy, and a summer thunderstorm was threatening to roll in. I tossed a few essentials into a duffel and went looking for an old box I'd packed in a hurry the night Seraphine tossed me out. It was taped shut, shoved into the back of the closet, mostly filled with notebooks and old receipts. At the bottom, folded between pages of an unused planner, was a single sheet of paper, yellowed but still legible. It was my father's handwriting. "If we ever win," it began, "we split it fairly. Seraphine handles the taxes. Abigail chooses the charity." No signature, no notary, just ink on paper and a date in the upper right corner. March 12th, 3 years ago. I stared at it for a long while. It wasn't legally binding, not really, but it was real. And it mattered, even if only to me. I added it to the folder. By the end of the week, Sophia had prepared the petition. I stood beside her at the courthouse as we filed it, my hands steady, my heart somewhere between panic and resolve. The clerk barely looked up as she took the documents. To her, it was just another day, another dispute. But to me, it was the start of something irreversible. That night, I sat on the porch of the trailer, watching the rain streak down the metal siding, and drafted one last message to Seraphine. Subject, final word. Message, you had your moment. You chose headlines and likes and lies. I gave you every chance to speak truth. Now I'll speak mine. In court. Abigail. The next morning, the reply came, not from her, from her lawyer. A formal cease and desist, claiming defamation and emotional distress. The tone was stiff, defensive. It accused me of malicious intent and warned of legal consequences if I continued to damage Seraphine's personal and professional reputation. I forwarded it to Sophia. She replied with one line, "That's not a defense, that's a tantrum." The difference was everything. Seraphine had always weaponized image. But in court, image didn't matter as much as evidence. and evidence doesn't flinch. For the first time, the power balance was shifting. She couldn't block court documents. She couldn't Photoshop timestamps. She couldn't charm a judge with a pearl necklace and an Instagram filter. And she knew it. The silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was loaded. I spent the weekend preparing emotionally, cleaning the trailer, buying a new blazer from a thrift store 2 towns over. I didn't want to show up to court looking like someone who had been kicked around. I wanted to look like someone who had gotten back up. On Sunday, I drove to the grocery store, grabbed coffee and basic groceries, then stopped by a print shop to make 2 extra copies of every document. I labeled folders, numbered pages, even added sticky tabs to mark key evidence. It was methodical, clinical, focused, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition and justice. As the sun set that night, I walked to the small mailbox near the trailer park entrance. I slipped in a stamped letter, addressed to the Lottery Commission, confirming I'd filed legal action, and requesting a hold on the payout until the matter was resolved. It wasn't flashy, but it was loud, louder than anything Seraphine had ever posted online. The courthouse wasn't nearly as grand as the kind you see on TV. It was a boxy beige building with faded signage and cracked pavement in the parking lot. A breeze rustled the flags out front, but otherwise, the morning was still. Like the air was holding its breath, just like I was. Inside, everything felt smaller than I expected. No sweeping staircase, no mahogany benches, just plastic chairs, government lighting, and the smell of copier toner. Courtroom C was tucked at the end of the second-floor hallway, where the buzz of fluorescent lights echoed off the tile. As I stepped inside with Sophia and Cassian beside me, I spotted Seraphine across the room. She looked like a magazine ad. Tailored navy suit, pearl earrings, a leather-bound folder clutched in manicured hands. Her expression was unreadable, but every part of her posture screamed confidence, if not arrogance. She glanced at me once, barely nodded, and then turned back to her lawyer. He looked the part too, gray suit, slicked back hair, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. Sophia leaned in and whispered, "He's flash, not substance. Let him underestimate you." "I think he already has," I murmured. We took our seats on the left side of the room. The bailiff called the case. The judge entered, robes flowing, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. Civil court, no jury. Just one man tasked with sorting through truth and lies while pretending not to care who flinched first. As opening remarks were made, my heart thudded, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Everything we'd prepared was real. Every document, every timestamp, every receipt. Seraphine could dress the part and spin her story, but today wasn't a press conference. It was a reckoning. When Cassian took the stand, he didn't stumble. He didn't pause or fidget. He sat straight, his voice steady, his words simple. "I picked Abigail up from her father's house on Thursday afternoon. She said she was running errands. I dropped her at the Chevron on Elm. She went inside alone. 10 minutes later, she came out with a lottery ticket, a grocery bag, and a bottle of water. I remember because she said, 'That's rent or destiny right there.'" He handed over a printed Uber trip receipt, time-stamped, geotagged. Seraphine's attorney tried to trip him up. "So you can say with certainty what she bought inside the store?" "No, sir," Cassian replied, calm. "But I saw the ticket in her hand when she came out. She showed it to me. She joked that she'd be rich by the weekend." The lawyer scoffed. "People say things all the time." Cassian didn't blink. "Some people follow through." When he stepped down, Sophia gave him a small nod. I smiled at him through a tight throat. His presence didn't just support my case, it reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. Then came the letter. Sophia stood, calm and composed. "Your Honor," she began, "we'd like to enter into evidence a handwritten note recovered from the plaintiff's personal belongings, authored by Mr. Victor Delacroix, father of both parties." She held up a sealed envelope, its edges worn. "It is addressed, in his handwriting, to the one who never asked for anything." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Sophia passed the envelope to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. The judge opened it slowly, reading silently for what felt like an eternity. Then his eyes lifted. "I will read this aloud for the record," he said. He cleared his throat. If anything ever happens with the lottery, remember, Abigail made it happen. Not Seraphine, not me, Abigail. Gasps rippled through the small courtroom. Even the bailiff raised his eyebrows. Seraphine went pale. She whispered something to her attorney, who quickly scribbled notes and passed them back. Her hands, always so poised, now fidgeted with the edges of her folder. The judge folded the letter, placed it gently on the bench, and looked toward Seraphine. Does the defense contest the authenticity of this document? Her lawyer hesitated. We'd like time to verify its origin. It's dated 3 years ago, Sophia interjected. Your client has had ample access to the father's records. The judge raised a hand. We'll proceed for now. We broke for lunch. Outside the courtroom, as I leaned near the hallway window, watching clouds roll across the sky, I heard her voice before I saw her. She's not family. She's a parasite. I turned. Seraphine was standing near the water fountain, her face twisted in something that looked less like rage and more like panic. She leeched off my life for years, and now she wants to steal what I built. A clerk passing by stopped in their tracks. She's unstable, Seraphine snapped again, louder. Always has been. Ask anyone. Sophia appeared beside me, gently touched my elbow. Let's step back. The clerk returned minutes later and walked directly into the courtroom. Within 10 minutes, the judge had returned and called both attorneys forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I've just been informed of inappropriate hallway behavior. This court will not tolerate outbursts, slander, or personal attacks. Any further misconduct will reflect directly in my ruling. Seraphine sat stiff, her jaw clenched, her mask was slipping, and everyone in the room saw it. The courtroom felt colder than it had all week. Maybe it was the air conditioning, maybe it was the tension, or maybe it was just the way time seemed to stretch thin across every inch of the room. Whatever it was, it pressed on my chest like weightless stone. I sat with my palms flat on my lap, not ringing, not clenched, just steady. Sophia glanced at me once before we stood, and I gave her the smallest nod. The judge returned to the bench, file in hand, glasses perched low. His expression gave nothing away, but the silence in the courtroom said enough. We all knew this was the end, or at least the beginning of it. In the matter of Abigail Delacroix versus Seraphine Greer, he began, regarding rightful ownership and distribution of the state lottery winnings. The next few minutes came out like a measured drumbeat. The court ruled that the ticket belonged to me. My name, my purchase, my documentation, all legally valid, all unshakable. The room didn't erupt. This wasn't TV. There were no gasps, no dramatic stormouts, just the slow release of breath, like everyone was realizing they'd been holding on too tight. Seraphine didn't move. She stared forward, eyes locked on the wood grain of the bench in front of her. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered something, but she didn't react. She just sat there, shellacked in silence. The judge continued. Seraphine was ordered to return any unspent funds. All assets acquired with winnings were to be frozen until documentation of purchase could be verified. Court costs, on her, but no damages were awarded. No monetary penalty for defamation. The judge said the intent was emotional, not financial, and that the court was not in the business of revenge. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the record set straight. As the gavel dropped, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Outside, the sun was high and hot, but the air had a different weight, lighter. Still heavy with consequence, but free of the quiet desperation that had followed me for weeks. Sophia patted my shoulder. You did well. I just told the truth, I said. Not everyone's willing to do that. We didn't linger outside the courthouse. There were no cameras waiting, no reporters swarming. Just a few passers-by, unaware that a family had just torn itself apart inside those walls. But that was about to change. Within 2 hours, the internet exploded. Screenshots of Seraphine's birthday rant leaked from someone in the hallway. Someone had recorded it, maybe the court clerk, maybe one of the interns, and sent it to a local blog. Within minutes, it went viral. She's not family. She's a parasite. Headlines weren't kind. Socialite sister loses millions in court battle. Hidden truth behind local lottery win. Audio leaked of Greer calling sister parasite. Seraphine's business, once praised for its sleek design and charitable outreach, got slammed with one-star reviews. Clients pulled their contracts. Sponsors backed out. Her face was no longer the image of resilience. It became a meme for hypocrisy. She tried to respond. A statement was posted on her website, polished and hollow. The situation has been emotionally challenging for everyone involved. I remain proud of the work I've done for my family and my community. It didn't matter. The court of public opinion doesn't issue appeals. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance on the ashes. That wasn't who I was. Instead, I posted one photo to my own page, a simple image of the original lottery ticket, timestamp and all, laying flat on the cheap countertop in the trailer I'd once borrowed. No caption. It didn't need one. That picture was shared over 15,000 times in the first 24 hours. People messaged me with apologies, support, even job offers. Distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years wrote long notes of regret. Some meant it, some didn't. I responded to none of them. Some things don't need words. When I left the courthouse that day, I didn't walk out with applause or cameras. I walked out alone, with my folder pressed tight to my chest and my own hand in mine. And that was enough. Weeks passed. I moved into a modest rental across town. Nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom with a decent kitchen and a quiet street where the neighbors kept to themselves. I painted the walls pale green, hung a few thrift store prints, and planted herbs on the windowsill. One morning, I picked up my mail from the P.O. box I'd set up to keep things private. Among the bills and ads was a padded envelope with no return address. Inside, I found a necklace, thin gold chain, small teardrop pendant. I recognized it immediately. It was the gift I'd given Seraphine on her birthday 10 years ago. She'd never worn it, said gold wasn't her color. I'd found it once, buried in the back of her drawer, still in the box. Alongside it, a note, no signature, just 5 words. You won. I never did. I held it for a moment, read the words twice. Then I walked outside, tore the note in half, and fed it to the small fire pit on my patio. The flames curled around the paper, then turned it to dust. Some things don't belong on shelves. Some apologies don't need to be heard. Justice gave me money, but pain gave me purpose. 6 months after the verdict, I unlocked the front door to a space that didn't just belong to me. It was me. Quiet, thoughtful, slightly uneven in its paint job, but warm, honest. The hand-painted sign above the entrance read "Second Chance" in faded teal script. Below it, stenciled smaller, were the words, "In honor of the overlooked." The name came to me one night, sometime between rebuilding my life and refusing to destroy someone else's. I didn't want my next chapter to be about revenge. I wanted it to be about rebuilding and giving others the same chance I fought for. The bookstore cafe opened on a Tuesday. No ribbon cutting, no cameras, just a pot of overbrewed coffee, a few paperbacks on folding tables, and a heart too full to speak. By week's end, we had regulars, an older couple who came in every Thursday for lemon cake and crossword puzzles, a single mom who brought her toddler for the reading nook, a teenage boy who barely made eye contact but asked if we carried books on welding. We did, and if we didn't, we ordered them. I hired 2 women from the local shelter, both mothers, both hungry to feel useful again. I paid them more than minimum wage, let them take home unsold pastries, watched their shoulders straighten every time someone called them ma'am with respect. The store wasn't fancy. There were water stains on the ceiling tiles and the espresso machine hissed like a dying cat, but it felt sacred, a space where no one had to prove their worth to take up space. Some afternoons, when the lunch rush faded and the light hit the windows just right, I'd lean against the counter and just breathe. That was something I'd forgotten how to do when I lived with Seraphine. Just breathe. Behind the counter, on a narrow shelf above the register, sat a small box wrapped in once blue paper, the edges yellowed, the tape curling. It was the last gift I ever gave her. 10 years ago, I'd saved up to buy her a silver bracelet with her initials engraved on the inside. I remember wrapping it myself, excited, hopeful even. But she never opened it, said she didn't like surprises. I found it in her nightstand drawer years later, untouched. After the trial, it showed up in a plain padded envelope at my P.O. box. No return address, no note. I knew it was from her, and I knew what she meant by it. I placed it on that shelf and left it unopened. Still, not out of anger, but because some things don't need to be unwrapped to be understood. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. One afternoon, a reporter from the San Antonio Chronicle stopped by. Young, eager, with too many notepads and an awkward handshake. He asked if he could write a feature on the store. I said yes, as long as he left the lottery out of it. He blinked. But that's the whole hook, right? I smiled. No. The hook is that people still care about places like this, that stories still matter, that we all need somewhere we don't have to audition for belonging. He tilted his head. Anything you'd like quoted? I thought for a moment, then said, I don't want to be remembered for what was taken from me. I want to be remembered for what I gave myself back. He wrote it down, nodding slowly. Weeks passed. The store settled into its rhythm. I baked more, talked less, built shelves, hung lights, added a poetry board where customers could post lines they loved or wrote themselves. Life wasn't loud anymore, but it was full. And then, every so often, something strange would happen. A small envelope would arrive. No name. Inside would be a donation, $20, sometimes more, toward the free book fund we ran for neighborhood kids. The handwriting on the notes was familiar. I'd seen it scrawled across grocery lists and family holiday cards, across judgmental sticky notes left on the fridge. It was hers. She never signed them, never called, never wrote anything more than, for the book bin. I never responded. Sometimes grace isn't a reunion. Sometimes it's just space, quiet, distant, unspoken space. There were days I thought about her, wondered if she was still in Texas or if the rumors were true, that she'd moved up to Oregon, changed her name, started over. I didn't hate her anymore. But I didn't miss her either, because moving on doesn't mean you carry everyone with you, and second chances, they're earned, not owed. One Saturday morning, as I flipped the sign to open, an elderly woman wandered in.